Good evening. I'm lighting some Palo Santo because this is, what number is this? This is the 13th episode of Unpacking White Supremacy, the IG Live series. And so I'm just lighting some Palo Santo so that we can make sure that the energy is right. And then hopefully my guest will come on soon so that we could get this party started. For those of you who don't know, my name is Antonio Morales, and I am the founder of the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services, which is a private practice dedicated to supporting Black and brown folk with transcending the adverse impact of white supremacy. And so not only am I a psychotherapist, but I consider myself a freedom fighter of the mind. Putting some Florida water on as well. Florida water, I don't know who be rocking Florida water, but for me, it calms me down. It sort of grounds me back into wherever I need to be grounded back into. Before I begin, I'm just going to share the intention of the Unpacking White Supremacy larger project, which is the Unpacking White Supremacy project, but the IG Live series is part of it, so I'm just going to share the intention of the project itself. And then hopefully my guest, where's my guest? I don't see you nowhere. Hopefully my guest will show up. So the intention of the Unpacking White Supremacy project is to spread awareness about the complex, nuanced ways that white supremacy infiltrates our lives, exploring it through a sociological lens as we unpack its adverse impact and engage in a process of psychological liberation and healing through the sharing of our personal narratives and collective lived experience. And so that's the intention of the project. Psychological liberation is important because when we think about white supremacy and the nuances of white supremacy or the iterations of it, we have to understand that racism is used as the tool of psychological warfare within the context of white supremacy. So that's why I bring up psychological liberation within the intention of the project, because this is about psychological liberation. When we're talking about being able to name and speak to what we're up against collectively, oftentimes a lot of us don't have the language to sort of describe what we're dealing with, and it makes us feel like we're going out of our minds. But when the reality, I don't know why my phone is ringing when my phone shouldn't be ringing. It's supposed to be on Do Not Disturb, messing up the flow. Good evening. Good evening, my peoples who are joining here. So like I was saying, because if I'm on the lives and somebody calls me, it knocks me off. So that's what just happened. So yes, racism is used as a tool of psychological warfare within the context of white supremacy. And it's important for us to understand what we're dealing with so that we can liberate our minds from it, right? Because again, like I was saying earlier, like most of us think that when we're up against these sort of structures and systems and ideology or ideas, which is what we internalize, we think there's something wrong with us without not understanding that what we're dealing with is, again, responding and reacting to an environment that's often hostile towards us because of white supremacy. And so that's why psychological liberation is so important. In the meantime, also one thing I wanted to share before, and I'm still waiting for my guest. One of the things that I wanted to share before we even begin is that for all the guests that I ever had on my Unpacking White Supremacy IG Live series, not only the one that happened in 2023, but before that, I just want to thank all the people that were previous guests, because I know most people don't want to talk about white supremacy, at least not publicly, right? Because there's so many people that shared interest in wanting to share about white supremacy or their experiences, but a lot of times, like fear will stop them, because it's like, I'm not going to go on a public platform and talk about white supremacy, right? Because they don't want to deal with whatever the backlash might look like. And that's how it works, right? We self-censor ourselves so that we don't get in trouble. And this is why collectively we sort of, whenever we take 2 steps forward, we take 2 steps back, and so on and so forth, because we continue to submit our will to the powers that be. And so that maintains a power structure or the status quo that keeps us oppressed. And so shout out to all my previous guests who were courageous enough to have this conversation. I know it's not easy. Especially when we're thinking about what's happening in the United States today. It's not an easy conversation to have. I'm looking for my guest. I don't see my guest, but I'm looking to see if my guest is around. I'm just going to mess around over here and see if I can find my guest. Today we have a special guest. His name is Shaquem Holmes. And once Shaquem Holmes shows up, I'm going to add him into the live so that we can get into the conversation. We're going to talk about Shaquem's experience with how he experienced racism or white supremacy within the context of his religious belief system or practice with Jehovah's Witness. And or at least his previous belief system. But I don't see my brother here. So in the meantime, I don't see my brother here. So I don't know what that's about. I can't do nothing. I just gotta wait. Anyway, I'm gonna wave to people that are here. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here today, this evening, as I await my guest. Beautiful. Oh, thanks. Thanks. It's. I can't see. Let me get my little magnifying glass, because these are blue light glasses. They're not like prescription, and so I need them for the blue light. Beautiful plants says it's Juliet. Thank you. These plants are the vision for my future, and so the vision I have for my future is to open a retreat center somewhere in the woods. And a healing retreat center for Black and brown folk. And so the plants behind me are sort of the possibility of that. I'm still waiting for my guest. Loves Lee's World, you sure you want to request to be on my live video, or that was an accident? I think that was an accident. I wonder what time is it, by the way. Trying to figure out where's my guest at. Trying to figure out where my guest is at. Don't see my guest. Trying to figure out where my guest is at. It's 7:10? Wow. So let me see if I could. Damn it. It's 7:10. Hey, cousin. Hey, cousins. I got a couple of cousins here checking me out on this wonderful night or evening. All right. I don't know where my guest is at. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's happening with my guest. Let me look. I don't know where's my guest. I don't know. Come on, guest. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop this and look for my guest. I mean, that's the only way I can do it, because I don't know how else to do it. Matter of fact, I'm going to stop this and then look for my guest. I'm not going to stop it. I'm just going to leave it and let my guest show up. If my guest doesn't show up, then I'll just continue talking about something else. in the meantime, as I await my guest, one of the things that I wanted to sort of talk about was thinking about, again, this is a challenging conversation for most people to have, and I recognize that. And so I give props to anybody who speaks up against white supremacy or brings awareness to white supremacy. And one of the things that I've been sort of thinking about most recently is what's happening in America. I know I mentioned that earlier, but one of the things that's interesting to me is that what we're seeing happening in the United States right now is almost like white supremacy's last ditch effort to like stay valid. And when you look at how our politicians are moving, which most of them align with white supremacy, the reality of the situation is that they want to make sure that they're going to maintain that status quo, right? Like the goal is to have a white America. But the point is, that the problem is with that is that white America as a possibility is not sustainable. It never was, because it doesn't align with the natural world. It's not in harmony with the natural world. We live on a diverse planet with all types of people, a diverse set of people, races, ethnicities, and so on and so forth, because that's the way the natural world functions. And to create a white planet, that don't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And so when we see what's happening in the United States of America, it's like they want a white country. And so what they're doing is they're attacking everyone who's not white to basically sort of do what was happening in Palestine, right? They sort of want to get rid of everyone who is of color so that they could have the United States of America belong to just white folk. And that is not sustainable. It never was sustainable. It's never going to be sustainable. And I think that's going to be the hard part that most people, white folk especially, are going to have to like digest. Because the reality of the situation is that you can't get rid of us. Especially if the majority of the world is melanated. The majority of the world is melanated. We're the global majority. And so there's no possible way to get rid of us. I'm just saying, you could do mass, you could deport as many migrants as you want. You can lock up as many of us as you try. You can't get rid of us. You know what I'm saying? And we are resilient, black and brown folk and other folk of color. And we continue to evolve and adapt to our environments. And so I just want to point that out because it is like a last-ditch effort, right? When we're thinking about what's going on in America, it's a last-ditch effort. It's like, we're so desperate to maintain the status quo that we're going to do whatever we need to do to make sure that it's maintained. And they're going and they're trying everything possible to make it happen. And it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like sick. Not like clinically sick, like not in that way, but like morally sick. Morally dysfunctional. And so, And I think that has to do with sort of, if you're a type of people who live in a scarcity mindset, you're always going to want more and more and more. You're going to be desperate for more and more and more resources, even if you don't know what to do with all those resources, right? Like you think about like rich people who are millionaires and billionaires, they're still hungry for more. Like what could you possibly need with even $5 million? Like how much do you need? And so people who are driven to hoard resources are driven by a scarcity mindset. If you have to hoard resources, if you need the whole planet to belong to you, that's not a flex. That's not a flex. That's a scarcity mindset. And so what you're saying is that you feel like you're never going to have enough. You're never going to feel fulfilled. That's what you're saying. And so I think we got to keep that in mind when we're seeing what's going on in America. And not only America, but across the globe, right? The ethnic cleansings and all the stuff and the genocides, right? That's a scarcity mindset. And I think we oftentimes don't recognize that while we're in the midst of it all. People who are in an abundance mindset or who operate from an abundance mindset, they don't need to colonize anything. They don't need to hoard resources. Right? People who live in an abundance mindset understand that they have enough. Our indigenous ancestors all knew that already, right? They had the earth. Wherever they lived in those moments, whether they even migrated this way or that way, the earth was a resource, but it wasn't to be hoarded. It was to be sort of lived with, coexisted with. And I think when we think about sort of, white brothers and sisters, they can't see that for whatever reason. And not all, right? But enough of them to say white brothers and sisters, right? Because we're like, not all white people think that. Well, enough of y'all. Sorry, it is what it is. I don't know where's my guest. Mother Earth provides. That's right. I don't know where my guest is at. I don't know if he got lost. I don't know who's this over here. Anini. I don't know. Sometimes, sometimes the screen names or the ats are, I can't really pronounce them because you guys are so creative. But yes, Mother Earth provides. And I think we forget that. And one of the things that I always tell my clients especially is, because we live in a capitalist society, right? Where capitalism is all about hoarding resources and exploitation. That's all it is. There's nothing beautiful about capitalism. It's all about hoarding resources and exploitation. That's what it is, capitalism. And capitalism comes from a scarcity mindset, especially when you think that the only way that you're going to be liberated, right, is if you sort of obtain as much material wealth as you possibly can, right? And that's a scarcity mindset. And so, and we're so always striving to sort of get the bag. Let's get the bag. Let's get the bag. Let's get the bag. How many of us have gotten the bag and are still miserable? There's so many people that get the bag and are still unfulfilled human beings. They can't even show love to the people closest to them. It's funny because I always argue with my family because I call myself a family collector because I'm constantly doing barbecues or inviting them over, like to chill and stuff. And the whole point of that is that because I recognize that my family is a resource. Like my family, the love that I share within my family context, right? That is a resource, right? And that's abundance. When we're together, we share an abundance of love, even when we're messy. That includes me, right? Because family and community is where our true resource is at, right? If we can lean back into that instead of thinking that we need to obtain material wealth, we could see and understand that our fulfillment comes from love. And that seems so cliche to say, but it's really true. You're never going to find love in a Lamborghini. You're never going to find love in the biggest house. There's big houses out there that are super empty. And so, and that's the indigenous ways of living, right? Thinking about community, thinking about family, thinking about your village, and coming back to the source, coming back to the earth. And what I was saying earlier, because I know I'm in a rant now because I don't know where my guest went. But what I was saying earlier, my guest, where are you, guest? Shaquem, where are you? This is your episode. What I was saying was like, when I talk to my clients, people that are driven, right, to sort of obtain more. I need to be super successful, and I need all the riches. I need wealth. I was like, but your wealth, the pursuit of your wealth takes you further away from your humanity. Because if you think that the wealth is going to liberate you, when right here is where liberation begins, or wealth is going to bring you happiness, or wealth is going to bring you fulfillment, or wealth is going to bring you love, right? Then we're completely disconnected from reality. We are engaging in our own oppression, right? And we know, I talk about capitalism and exploitation. Why do you think all these companies, insurance companies, health insurance companies, home insurance companies, I mean, everything has a price tag. I don't know how many bills that I pay a month. I keep pouring into bills and bills and bills and bills and bills, like the Destiny's Child song. And it doesn't give me nothing back. I don't get nothing back. Our taxes that we pay, thousands of dollars of taxes, goes to fund wars across the globe, right? We don't have nothing. We don't get nothing in return. Our politicians, they go into office, they say they're going to serve us, And what they do is they go and become rich. And they forget about the voters and what we want or what we need. So capitalism is not the answer to our fulfillment, to our wholeness, our completion, our completeness. It's not the answer to our healing. It's not the answer to our self-actualization. I'm just saying that because, that's scarcity. That's scarcity. It's not to say that we don't need money to live in the world that we live in. We do. But if your only goal is the bag, if that's it, if that's what drives you, you're gonna burn yourself out. I think about so many of my fellow therapists, psychotherapists, and I follow these various boards of psychotherapists or therapists, mental health therapists, and the thing that they mostly speak about is how do they make six figures? How do we make six figures? How do we make six figures? How do we make six figures? It's never about there's no other conversation. And I say to myself, that would be nice to make six figures, but if I'm driven by six figures, I'm not serving the clients or the community that said I'm here for. Because now I'm looking at them as a price tag versus looking at them as people that I can serve in the way that I know I can serve them, right? Because my business is in psychological liberation, right? And psychological, if I'm not freeing someone's mind through the services I provide, if I'm not liberating them, if there's something that if they're not shifting or moving as a result of the work or the contribution that I make to them, I'm not on my purpose. And I can't do that if I'm looking for six figures and I'm having 50 or 60 clients per week. And that's not sustainable. 40 clients is not sustainable. 30 clients is barely sustainable. Right? And there's so many therapists that are driven by scarcity mindset. And then we wonder why our clients don't show up or they leave therapy. And so anyway, I know that was a rant. This wasn't a planned rant, but I don't know where my guest is at. And so if anyone wants to join, I can sort of walk you to some prompts. If you want me to ask you some questions about white supremacy, it's completely up to you. Just make the request if you want to join the IG live, and then I can bring you through some prompts and then see what we can come up with sort of in a very sort of improvising kind of way. We can improvise this. So does anybody want to join this conversation? And so I can ask you your own experience with white supremacy. Anyone? Any takers? Any courageous people out there? Okay, no one has asked to join. So I'm going to end this live. I'm going to look for my guest to see if I can find him. And then if I find him, then I'll bring him back. Thank you. Was it a great rant? Thank you. I appreciate that it was a great rant. There's more inside of me that I sort of want to express. But I usually don't like to go on rants, which is why I don't do them. I prefer to have structured conversations, because if I go on a rant, I could go in any direction. And so I always want to make sure that I'm always sort of intentional about what I say and what comes out of my mouth. And I always want to make sure that I'm not just vomiting, but that I'm actually contributing to a larger conversation for our peoples. And so I know people go on rants, and I just went on a rant. And I could keep going on a rant, but I don't want to, because I think it's important that I'm mindful of whatever it is that I'm sharing as far as my point of view. In the meantime, thank you for joining today's IG Live series. You want me to continue to rant? What would you like me to expand on? Who wants to join? Would you like to join so I can continue to rant, or so I can ask you some questions? It's up to you. I'm open. I have this slot scheduled for 1 hour from 7 o'clock p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. That's the time of the... Okay, all right. I have 2 people. Okay, let's see. It says view request. Let's see. I viewed a request and I accepted a request. Hey,
Oh, did I get on?
yes, you did. What's going on,
Antonio,
Carolina?
hello.
How's it going?
It's going great. I'm having a wonderful day. And then I ran into your live and it made it even better.
Well, thank you for joining the live. I had a guest. I don't know where he went, so I went a little rant, as you know. And I'm open to having conversations with other people if my guest doesn't come because there's still stuff to share, right? And so,
So good.
are you willing to like be engaged with some prompts?
I am. I have maybe 20 minutes. We
All right,
can
20 minutes is
chat.
sufficient.
And yeah, I'm in Colorado right now. I'm at a Climate Action Network conference
Uh huh.
where we're talking about environmentalism in exactly the lens you're talking about. And it just was a great combo to come into. So thank you.
Beautiful. So let's just share about. You want to introduce yourself real quick and let the audience know who you are?
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Carolina. Um, I am a licensed social worker from Rutgers. That's actually where I met Antonio himself, and I learned about his work. And yeah, I've been doing direct service work, social services kind of stuff. And I landed now at a nonprofit in Newark, the Newark Water Coalition, where it's a very informal kind of nonprofit, but we do a lot of direct work. We work straight with everybody in our neighborhood, and we're super local. And I've learned a lot. So this is the kind of work that I'm doing. So I moved away from counseling too much and more for direct practice. And I want to embody better what I already know, which is, issues of white supremacy, sexism, patriarchy, racism in our communities through a mindful and more holistic lens. I'm still deciding who I want to get my, study under in terms of counseling.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I am in training.
That's amazing. I didn't know you got used into social work as well. That's amazing. Because don't
Yes,
you also like design jewelry?
yes, I'm also an
All right,
artist, and
because that's like your man. I
yeah,
seen that. I see you. Your jewelry is beautiful stuff.
yeah.
You want to share about your jewelry real quick?
Yeah, so when I was 18, I found art as a way to save myself. It was meditative work, and so I work with wire jewelry, and I do wire wrapping. But then I've taught myself some silversmith techniques, some goldsmith techniques, and I'm just trying to continue to learn too in art in that kind of like metal work fashion.
Amazing. So Carolina, I know um that we have only about 20 minutes or maybe less than that at this point. And so I'm not going to go into all the prompts, but I'm going to go straight into the original prompts that I usually ask guests. And
Yeah.
so I always ask guests, right, in their own point of view when it comes to white supremacy. I always ask the guests, and I know this is straight up like we're improvising right now, right? Because I didn't give you the prompts before.
Okay.
I always ask guests, how do they, for themselves, define white supremacy?
Ooh. I mean, I think I would say um, it is an economic, social, political, environmental. It's like something that reaches all parts of our life that prioritizes what we see now is white males. Um, Even more, it's also about your wealth too. So you could be a black male as well. And reproduce the symptoms and systems of white supremacy as well.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's very insidious because we all do it in certain ways.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Absolutely. And so thank you for that definition. Now, when we think about white supremacy sort of functions in various iterations, right? We have mass incarceration, we have genocide, we have colonialism, we have sexual exploitation, we have religious persecution. There's so many iterations of white supremacy that we can point to. Oftentimes, people think that white supremacy is just like about white like hate groups, when really white supremacy is an ideology that's sort of like the umbrella term that holds all these other sort of iterations of it or expressions of
Mm.
it. And so I usually ask my guests if they was to point out one iteration of white supremacy that they've experienced, what would that be? Like if you was to think about one thing that you've experienced in your own life, an iteration of white supremacy, what would
Mhm.
you sort of want to share about briefly?
Yeah, and I'd like to add to the definition that it is violent inherently. Like there will always be violence against another people. That's like really important. As you were saying, all these things, all of
Mm-hmm.
them are violence against groups. So I think my first kind of touch on that was being a woman and being South American in origin. My family is from South America, and that is where I saw how people would just listen more to males, and especially white wealthy males. And I had to I'm still unlearning that feeling that I get to like automatically like this person must know what they're talking about because they have money, they have status, and that's what society values.
That's right.
And by valuing that, they devalue me. And
Mm,
so there's that part where it's like being a woman was less, I must know less, I must do
mm,
less, I must speak less.
yes. Mm-hmm.
And you know, realizing that that's not me, that was
Mm-hmm.
something taught to me in
Mm-hmm.
order to hold up that system of this white wealthy person, or just wealthy person, especially now,
Mm-hmm.
um, knows deserves more than me for some.
Yeah.
Like it's in so many layers. It's hard to explain, but
Yeah.
definitely being a woman was my first lick with that supremacy and how it was violent against me, and even doing it to myself.
Right. So you're mentioning like patriarchy, right? The patriarchy,
Yeah.
which is definitely sort of an iteration of white supremacy, because you think about like indigenous cultures, we honor the women in our families. We know that they're the center. I don't know one family that I know of, black or brown family, that doesn't center the woman. I don't know one, right?
Right.
Even though because we live in a patriarchal sort of system, men think that they're the head of the household, but not really. Not
Hmm.
really. In real life, the woman is the center. Right?
Hmm.
And so we oftentimes don't associate the patriarchy or even misogyny, right, with
Yeah.
white supremacy. But if we think about the history of indigenous folk, like we understand and know that women, well, look, my guest is here. Isn't that something? We understand and
Yay.
know. Hello, guest. I see that you're here finally. Um, and so we often don't connect those two things, right? When we're thinking about white supremacy and patriarchy, sort of working hand in hand. I know Bell Hooks used to talk about it and connect it, right? But it's really
Yeah.
real. I think oftentimes as men who live in a patriarchy, we don't sort of understand what it feels like to be a woman in the world, right? So there's certain things that women deal with that I don't think we're aware of as men because we just don't have to think about it. And the only way, at least for me, that I've learned about women and what they deal with is by asking questions, especially when it comes to the women that I work with on a sort of professional level.
Yeah.
Because there's different than asking the woman in my family because it's just a different kind of conversation. But I've noticed that I've learned a lot through asking women of their lived experience, right, to share their lived experience. So when we're thinking about your experience as a woman and thinking about the patriarchy as an iteration of white supremacy, how do you say that it has adversely impacted you overall?
Yeah. I mean, so within in two ways, right? Within myself and how people act towards me. So within myself, not being secure in my ideas, in my actions, in what I can even achieve, like immediately women, you're like, oh, you're this soft thing. Oh, don't stress too much. Oh, all you have to do is work and or clean and be a mother to your kid. It's very confining, right?
Mm-hmm.
And finding my place along that, I was like, no, maybe even I don't even want to be a woman anymore. I don't want to be a girl. Like, why are
Mm-hmm.
you limiting me so much? And I think
Right,
that's where a lot of my rebellious side came out. It's
right,
like,
right.
if a boy can do that, I can do that.
That's
Like,
right,
and so me even trying things I don't want to try, but just to like prove that like a girl can do that too.
right.
Um, that was a struggle within myself, right? Am I feminine enough, right? Is my voice
Mm-hmm.
cute enough? Like, is it soft?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of policing of myself. But then the flip side of liberating that and finding and uncovering who that was is even so much more beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
because now I understand when I see it in other people, and
Mm-hmm.
it allows me to give them grace. Uh, mm,
I'm listening to you. I'm thinking about what you're describing is sort of the confines of gender norms, right? And
mm,
thinking about what it means to be a woman, right? And thinking about sort of how you sort of saw yourself within that construct. And it reminds me of the conversation happening overall, right, in America, when we're thinking about gender norms and who's a woman
mm,
and who's not a woman and who's a man and who's not a man. And I just literally was having this conversation the other day around gender norms and how all of it is a social construct. Who's to say what a woman is supposed to be like and how she's supposed to show up, and what a man's supposed to be like and how he's supposed to show up, when we made it all up anyway, right?
yeah.
There's no truth to any of how we think of gender norms. And it sounds to me like one of the things that you've sort of been working on is sort of breaking through gender norms, right? To sort of liberate yourself from what it seems to me, which I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, is the limitations of what it means to be a woman in a patriarchal sort of society. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, the limitations, and then the self-harm that I do to myself because of that also.
Mm.
Which is the part that confused me the most. Like, why do I just like thinking you're crazy when really it's society doing something to you? Because no one's gonna fit that, that beautiful whatever image. And even when you do, there's still violence against you. So it doesn't protect you. It just makes you maybe feel less like, okay, maybe this person won't do this. But you're hurting yourself in that same way too.
That's
So
right.
you never win by trying to live up to these things.
Because you further
And
oppress yourself by trying to live up to these things.
yes,
Yeah.
and that's where you kind of touched on that earlier, how we are doing the oppression ourselves. Like, they taught us to police ourselves, our communities. And that's the part where I'm trying to learn, right, to change. Like, as I'm changing, allowing space for others to change. And that's kind of where in therapy is helpful, like you not reactive the same way, being able to role play and like talk about things that would trigger me
Mm-hmm.
usually.
Mm-hmm.
And when I don't get triggered anymore, I'm allowing others to change or be curious, like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And so the other part of that is like, that I was saying of what being done to me is, oh, I forgot where I was heading with that.
You
But
was
this is
talking
such a
about like
great
not. You
point.
was talking about not being triggered.
Oh yes, um, yeah, something in there.
But this,
I was,
but this. So what I'm hearing is, as we thinking about your lived experience, right? When you're sharing this lived experience, what I'm hearing is that you're saying that, oftentimes you're responding and reacting to like whatever's coming your way that
mm,
seems to be degrading you as a woman, right? Correct? And how you
yes,
sort of respond to that, how you choose to respond to that is sort of what you're working on, is what I'm hearing.
yeah, yeah, and it's a mix of uncovering that identity, because it's like it's always there. We always have to know that it's in us, and it's just being covered up. And so everything we have is inside of us already. And
Yes.
it's a mix of uncovering a lot of that oppression, all of that self-hatred, like even just accepting the way that I look has been part of that. And then also, while doing that inner reflection part, seeing how I can change in my actions, which helps change my family even, like I think
Yes.
COVID kind of made everybody more health conscious, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a moment where me and my family like really started thinking like, well, what are we eating? Who are we, how are we acting with one another? Because, people got cabin fever around that time.
Yo, I had cabin fever. I was like, I need to get like out. Like I needed to like move somewhere because I was feeling like I was going crazy. I needed to move. And so,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So listen, I really want to keep going with you, but I know like we didn't prepare. I didn't give you all the prompts. But let me ask you a question because I'm so interested in hearing more about your story, your lived experience. Is it okay? Is it okay that I DM you and then we do an actual whole version of the IG live for you? Like
Yeah,
just
this sounds fun. This is a
all
great
right,
combo.
all right.
And
I know like we did a little introduction, but I know you said you only had 20 minutes because that's why I didn't go through all the prompts. And
yeah.
so I feel like there's more to unpack in your story, and I just wanted to maybe well, not maybe, but maybe we can schedule an actual IG live where you're like the full guest. I
Let's
think that
do
would be
it.
awesome.
I
Are you
think these are
down for
great
that?
questions. Yeah, yeah. That sounds like a
I
lot of fun.
so you
Yeah.
know, Carolina, you know what I want to do? I'm gonna DM you. First of all, DM me your email, and then I'm gonna send you an email, right, with the form, the link to the form, which is gonna prepare you for the IG live, and then I'll follow up with with the flyer and stuff. You'll see all the
Okay,
instructions. I'll give you all
fun.
the instructions. But yo, thanks for coming on. It was great seeing
Hell
you today.
yeah. This was perfect. I had such a full day of this stuff,
Uh,
but on like other like advocacy stuff.
uh-huh.
And this is all the therapy clinical stuff that I want to get back to. I want to, like I said, find who I want to learn from because on a more holistic side, I love what you do too. Because well, you know, you said like liberating your clients, like that their consciousness is kind of like that's on the dot, on the
Yo,
spot what
cause
our therapists need to be doing. And you know, our, especially for our communities, this is all encompassing. It's not just feel better so you can get back into the matrix,
yes.
numb yourself, get draw so you can go back to working for Donald Trump. Like
Ah,
that's not at least be conscious of it, Bobby. Like it's just
and that's the point, right? Like when I think about psychological liberation, because
yes, there
like
you go.
people say don't intellectualize them. However, like everything that's we experience is happening in the mind. Like it's our psychology that's fucked with the most, right?
Yeah.
And I think if we can start recognizing our psychology and what it is that sort of keeps us oppressed, right, and break free from that, the ideas mostly, right, then
Mm,
we could really start a real true healing process. And
yeah.
then once we start a healing process and we work through that, right, then we could self-actualize. That's the three steps that I think about when I think about psychological
Mm,
liberation, then leads to healing, then leads to self-actualization. And oftentimes I think we don't sort of honor that process. And I think it's important to honor that process. At least that's the way I've sort of experienced my own
mm,
self-evolve, right? It's understanding
yeah.
my own mindset around my own lived experience and sort of making sense of it. And you know what? When it comes to like the structural shit, or when we think about white supremacy as a context, like no one ever talks about it. And then we go to a therapist and we're supposed to be like, maybe it's because I have ADHD or whatever it
Yeah,
is
yeah,
that they want to, right? And
yeah.
then no one talks about like actually you might be responding to a system, right, that's hostile against your humanity. And so no wonder why you think you're losing your mind. No one talks about it. Like we're not supposed
Yeah.
to talk about white supremacy, God forbid.
Right. No, it needs to be, it's in everything, and I think that's why it's really important. And this is the kind of counseling or just even consultation, like people actually feel listened to, and that's why the work that we do when it's like in person and people they're like, "Wow, you can actually hear me?" I'm like, "Uh-huh." I'm here
Word,
with you.
word. And you know
Yeah.
what's, we know I think is also important when you think about these conversations. See, we've been in higher education, we've been in academic spaces, and so the average person who's not in higher ed spaces or academic spaces, they don't often have a connection to these types of conversations, right?
Mm.
So the point of the live, the IG live, is to talk to anybody, right? No matter what their level of education is, so that we
Mm.
can sort of normalize the fact that we're dealing with this craziness together, and that there's nothing wrong with us individually, but it's more of a systemic thing that sort of we're responding and reacting to. I keep saying that because
Yeah.
it's important to keep recognizing that we're responding and reacting to an environment that's hostile towards us, which
Mm.
makes us feel,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And when
yeah,
we put it in words, it's medicine. And that's the part that they want to take away, the depth of it. That's the depth where we need interpersonal actual depth and communication because it's medicine within that. And it's like we're not, because we studied this, we don't, you know, oh, I can heal you. No. We're just facilitating this gift we already were given that
yes,
they're stifling, you know? Woo, we
yes.
could go on. We could go on.
I'm gonna because I'm thinking about like the banning of books, the erasing of various curriculums in higher education. I'm thinking
Mhm.
about all of the ways that they don't want us to access language to
Yeah.
access the medicine, right?
Yeah.
And I love that you said it's medicine because that's exactly what it is, right? And
Yeah.
and because we're human beings, we're not like birds or like we're not like hamsters or like maybe dogs. They talk a lot because my dogs talk a lot,
Mm.
but like birds talk a lot too, actually. But like
Good.
to be able to articulate and sort of understand the nuance of our lived experience through our language really is medicine because it gives us clarity that we otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah, allows us to understand like children, like, oh, they can't speak, they don't know the words, and like we go our whole lives not knowing the words and blaming ourselves and like getting into this crazy thing, and it's like, no, it's just this clear. It can be this present. You can be full and together now. You don't have to live all your life to get there. Like, we are here. And that's why I'm trying to integrate into my life every day. But this shit is crazy,
No,
Ramos.
listen. I know exactly what you're talking about. um,
Yeah.
but anyway,
Yep.
we're gonna do a whole live for you
Let's
because I feel like you got more gems to share, and I want to hear you and understand your perspective further. Because I feel like you said 20 minutes, and then I feel like I'm rushing through it, and I'm not able to unpack what I want to. So I just want to honor that.
Yeah.
I So I'm gonna hit you up, and you
Let's
can
do it.
also
I'm gonna
email
send you
me.
my email.
Send me an email through the DM, and I'm gonna email you, and then we're gonna get this rolling.
Let's
In the
do it.
meantime, thanks for showing up, and I appreciate all the work you're doing and everything you shared today.
Thank you so much for being here and making the space to do so. I'm glad I popped in. It's such a great rest of my day.
You're welcome, and hopefully, I don't know if my guest is still on, but maybe I'll start with him. I don't know if he's still on, but I'll see. If he's not, I'll just end it.
All right. Well, I hope they are, and I hope they get a good conversation with you because, like I said, I love tuning in whenever you're on. So
Thank you.
God
I'll talk to
bless,
you
and we'll,
soon.
we'll talk soon.
All right, be safe.
Ciao, ciao.
Peace.
Peace.
So that was awesome. That was a great sort of uh, improvisation because my guest didn't show up. I see that my guest came through. So let me see if I could uh let me see if I could I'm making a request for my guest to show up. Let's see what happens. Where's my guest? Yep. Yo,
Hey,
what
my
up?
God.
What
I am
happened?
so sorry. I was literally sitting in front of my laptop for like the past hour, pretty much since like 6 o'clock.
I'm,
Signed into my Instagram account on my laptop.
oh, you did it through the
Um,
laptop. Okay, that's why.
yeah. Would that prevent me from going live or
Yeah.
seeing it would?
Yeah, you can't go live through the laptop, it's only through the cell phones.
Oh, okay. So that was my mistake because I logged into my account on my laptop thinking I could just sit it here and go live
Oh,
with
you thought
you.
you did.
So yeah, I texted you, I called you maybe like 10 minutes before 7, to see if I would be receiving some sort of an invite via, Instagram or whatever so I could sign on. But I,
Okay,
I apologize for that.
that's okay. I saw someone, I don't know, you must have been calling me because while I was starting the live, a call came in and disrupted my live, and I was like, "Who's calling me right now in the middle of the live?" And so that's my bad too. I thought everyone knew that usually you can only go on, live through the cell phone. Um, so I had somebody else show up, who came in and sort of filled up some of the space because I was going on a rant in the beginning, and so I didn't want to like kill the time. Meaning, I didn't want to kill the time, but I didn't want to just hang up and stop it before I got somebody's input because I think it's important to keep going. In the meantime, uh, you want to do this? We're gonna do this fully. You want to do this fully?
Yes, we can absolutely do it fully. Let's do it.
Okay. So so welcome. This is my guest, uh, Mr. Shaquem Holmes, and I just real briefly, I would like you to share with our audience members. First of all, what time is it that you have over there? So I just want to be mindful of the time.
Yes, so it is 10 to 8 p.m. right now.
All right, so let's try to we're gonna get this in. Um, and so here's what I usually do as an icebreaker. I always ask a guest to sort of share something about yourself that you would like the audience members to know.
Okay, something about myself. Um, well, I'm a native New Yorker, born in Manhattan, raised here in the Bronx. I've lived here in New York City all of my life. Um, um, yeah, I'm a native New Yorker. I'm as New York City as it can get.
Uh-huh. Anything else you want to say about that?
Um, I attended schools here in New York City. Every school that I attended, including all the way up through higher education. Went to Lehman College, got my bachelor's degree in social work, then went off to the Columbia School of Social Work and got my master's degree in social work. And working here in the Bronx and have been for the past, 5 or 6 years, ever since I graduated from school.
Yeah. I love the Bronx, even though like the Bronx is not Brooklyn. I still got mad love for the Bronx. I went and got my master's at Lehman College from the social work department, and it was an
Okay.
interesting experience. But especially like being in the Bronx and sort of being at a couple of internships over there, I thought it was interesting. All right, so usually I'll ask that icebreaker, then I'll go into the first prompt, which is, tell us where your people are from, and if you can name one positive characteristic that you inherited from your people, and then share about how that shows up in your life today.
So myself and my parents were from New York City. My grandparents are from the South, Savannah, Georgia. And of course, if we want to go further back than that, of course, my ancestors are from, the motherland, Africa. So, I definitely identify with the motherland. But, I'm of African American descent. Um, and, uh, and yeah,
And what's the what name one positive characteristic that you inherited from your peoples?
I would say definitely resilience. That's one characteristic that I've inherited from my people, resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the way I can just, navigate struggle and obstacle, you know, despite how difficult they may be, I always find a way to, encourage myself, motivate myself, and keep myself going,
Mm-hmm.
despite those obstacles and struggles along the way.
I was just talking about that earlier, talking about like what we're up against in the United States of America, and thinking about how, and I think the resilience is part of that when we're thinking about like when we think about that we exist in this hostile territory, we sort of have to like adapt to the environment so that we can still thrive anyway. And I think oftentimes resilience plays a role in that, right? Thinking about, because it's almost like uh, there was a documentary that I saw many years ago, right, on PBS, and it was about this woman who was sort of in the forest trying to preserve a forest, because they were trying to cut down these old growth trees. I don't remember what kind of trees or where the trees were or where the place was, but she camped out in the tree and
Mm,
talked about one day or one particular night there was a storm that happened, and she was thinking she was gonna die, right? And so what happened was, uh, she said the tree spoke to her, and the tree said, all you gotta do is sort of bend, go like this, right? And when I think about what we deal with, especially as Black and Brown folk, that we have to learn to bend, right? Meaning the trees are not going to be snapped by the wind or the storm that was happening in the tree that the woman was in, and she learned that sort of lesson to like sort of be able to be like flexible with what we're dealing with, which I think is part of the resilience and the adaptability, because otherwise we'll break into pieces.
right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now I'm going to go into, because we know we're talking about white supremacy, and I want you to define for yourself in your own words what white supremacy is, or how would you describe white supremacy?
I would definitely describe white supremacy as the fundamental belief that white people or people of European descent are, superior to all other racial and ethnic groups of people on the planet, whether that be in the area of intellect, in the biologically superior, physically superior, or and because of that belief about their superiority, that they are destined to be in positions of power and influence, whether that be in social positions, political positions, economic positions, and even what I would like to talk about today, religious positions. You know, so because of that fundamental belief about them being superior, they believe that they're destined to be um, in positions of control and power over all other peoples on the planet.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about it. Like it's something, isn't it? Um, so since you brought up religion, right? I wanted to ask you, because I always ask my guests to think about one iteration of white supremacy that they want to highlight as far as their lived experience is concerned. And so, what iteration of white supremacy or experience, a lived experience that you have with white supremacy that you would like to highlight and share about today?
So the iteration of white supremacy that I would like to share and highlight today is my experience with religion. I know when we talk about white supremacy, I think, sometimes we might, touch on religion a little bit. But I think when it comes to religion and white supremacy, that connection kind of takes the backseat to talking about white supremacy and how it manifests itself in the political world, in our economic world, and our social world. But when it comes to religion, I don't think that's something that we often talk about and really emphasize and highlight as much as we should. But for 10 years of my life, I was a Jehovah's Witness for 10 years of my life. From the time I was 15 years of age up until about 25. I got into studying the Bible with them and just got really caught up in the religion and started attending, their religious meetings, reading their literature, studying their literature, and eventually just becoming fully involved in the religion. Now, the connection between white supremacy and this religion, thinking back to my experience with the religion and what has happened to me. When I look back, when I did my research and discovered that, this religion was founded by a white man, as is the case with many religions. Charles Taze Russell, he's the founder of this religion. Throughout the course of this religion's history, for as long as it's been in existence, all of its leaders and the men and the people they appointed to be in positions of power influence, more often than not, were white males. They had presidents. The corporation that they have is called the Watchtower, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. The first one was formed in Pennsylvania. The second one was formed here in New York. But all of the presidents of that corporation or society were white males. They then moved away. They shifted away from a single person leadership model to a group leadership model. But even with this group leadership model, all of the men that they appointed to be in this group were white males. There is currently a black man on that group, on that body. They call it the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. But he is the only black male or the person of color to be on that body and has ever served on that body. And I believe he was appointed in 1999. But aside from him, the rest are white males. And so I look at that. These men are in positions of power. They develop and they formulate policies based on their interpretations of the Bible. A lot of these policies are very harmful to lots of people, including people of color. But there's not a person of color on these bodies. There's not a female on these bodies. And just as you were talking with the female who was on your live prior to, me getting on the live, we talk about the patriarchal system and how that's connected to white supremacy too. These gender roles that have been constructed and developed over time. And so, this belief that only men can be in positions of power and influence in these religious institutions, that too is very much connected to white supremacist ideology. I think it's important for people to understand that. But yeah, so from their leadership model to going into, the theological aspect of it, in their publications, you will often see God and angelic beings and characters of the Bible are depicted as white individuals. You will never see anybody who looks like me or somebody who looks like you. They will always be white individuals. And, that too is something that's connected to the idea or the belief that white people are somehow pure, somehow innocent, that they're righteous, they're holy, that we cannot fathom that any angelic being or any, Bible character can be somebody who looks like me. So this too is the sort of subtle, indoctrination that goes on in the minds of its adherents and the minds of its believers. We just accept this, without question, and we accept the teachings of these men, their interpretations of the Bible, and they take their interpretations of the Bible and create these policies that are just really, really harmful.
Yeah.
And their teachings have changed throughout the centuries. And one of the things that kind of woke me up is doing my research, on their previous teachings. Once upon a time, they call them kingdom halls. They don't call them churches, but they're kingdom halls, which are basically their congregations. Their congregations were segregated. So, people of different colors, blacks couldn't congregate together with whites, and whites couldn't congregate together with blacks. There were certain things that people of color could not do that only white individuals could do. They also have this teaching where, Jehovah's Witnesses have a lot of unique teachings, but they have this unique teaching where they believe that, there's going to be this new world that's going to come about. God is going to create a new world, and only, basically Jehovah's Witnesses are going to be able to live in that new world. And one of their previous teachings was that in this new system of things, as they refer to it, in this new world, all peoples on the planet would develop white skin, basically. All people on the planet would develop white skin. And
What do you mean? Wait, what do you mean develop white skin?
Yes,
Like we will no longer be melanated beings?
Yes, so they believe that there would no longer be melanated beings. That all people with color in their skin would then turn white in this new system and in this new world. That was one of their teachings. Obviously, a teaching that's grounded in complete and blatant racism and white supremacy. And, that's kind of and digging into that stuff is kind of what, led me to, waking up and started questioning things a little bit more.
So you said you was with the organization for 10 years, right?
For 10 years of my life, yes.
So while you were in this space, sort of, engaging in your worship or your religious practices, how are you impacted by all that? Especially once you started recognizing that this stuff was the way this stuff was. How did that impact you? And then as you think about the impact, also I want you to sort of also highlight not only the impact on you, the adverse impact, but how did it impact your mental health as well?
Yeah, it definitely had a negative psychological and emotional impact on me, because you feel like it's like, as people of color, we're already marginalized in the world that we live in. So it's like you're marginalizing yourself even more by joining this religion, because they really want to push aside, the realities of what it's like to be a black person or a person of color living in this world.
Wait, can you say more about that part? Because just so we can be clear. What do you mean when you say that? Yeah.
Sure. So, they're very big on there's this hyper focus on spirituality.
Right.
So because of the hyper focus on spirituality, they kind of like to ignore reality. Ignore reality, particularly as it relates to race and race relations. They don't want to acknowledge. It's never acknowledged, and it's never spoken about. The disparate treatment between people of color, black folk, and white folk. We don't talk about that. We're supposed to come into this space and act like we're all happy. Act like, we're all God's people and we're all one and all of those different things. And even within this space, we have to recognize that race plays a role in terms of how we're treated.
Right.
But that's something that's not emphasized. And as I stated to you, all of the men who are on this very powerful body that controls this religion, the majority of them are white males. But if I were to call that out, or if I were to mention that, I'm told that I'm, that's satanic thinking, or that's devilish thinking, or you're being influenced by the devil to say those different things. And so, it definitely has a negative impact on you, because why can I not, as a person of color, as a black man, really, why can't we acknowledge this? Why can't we talk about this and the impact that it has on us? So it definitely had a negative, impact on, my mental health, my mental and emotional well-being. And, I just had to dig deep and, read and do my research just to understand really what was happening to me.
Can you be specific about how, like, in what ways it impacted you, your psychological well-being? Can you give us a specific example? This was that so people could understand, because I'm sure other people are obviously dealing with this, right? Like when we
Yeah.
think about these lives, it's not just we're sharing it, you and I, but we're sharing it with everyone else, right? Who because black and brown people have to live in this structure, right? And so there's various ways that we experience it. So can you be specific about how it impacted you when it comes to your mental health?
Yes, absolutely. So, sometimes when I did this research and I discovered these things,
Yeah.
and with once upon a time, I went on Google and I just typed in the word Jehovah's Witnesses because I was just curious as to what would pop up. And so, a lot of information popped up, news stories, articles, previous teachings, accounts of, things that former members had gone through. But there was this one particular article that talked about racism in the Watchtower, or the
Mm.
racist teachings of the Watchtower. And it was written by a former Jehovah's Witness who used the alias John Cedars. And so I read that article, and it was in that article that I discovered this teaching about how they believed that people of color would turn white in this new system or in this new world. And how they described, black people as being good servants or, being meek and humble and all of those things, and people who are good at taking instructions. And, that's when I discovered all of these different racist teachings. And so I took that article, I copied the link and pasted it into and sent it to a friend via email, who was also a Jehovah's Witness, another black man. I sent it to him, and the reaction I got was not the reaction that I was expecting.
What you mean?
What I mean by that is that it is highly discouraged. It is highly discouraged as a Jehovah's Witness to consider any information that is critical of the religion
Mm.
or that's critical of the organization. It
Wow.
is it is strictly forbidden.
Mm.
It is strictly forbidden. So they call former members apostates. So, when he saw the information, the first thing he said to me via email was that, hey, this is apostate information. You shouldn't be looking at this.
Mm.
Um, but, I emphasized to him via email, I communicated to him, I said, well, the information that's contained within the article are coming straight from, Watchtower sources. These are things that they've written and spoken about and taught themselves for many years ago. He said, oh, no, that's not the case. They never said that. They never did that. And so it's like there's this denial of the truth. There's this denial of reality, and it can make you feel like you're going crazy. And so that's what I kind of felt like. It was a very isolating experience because there's really nobody you can talk to about the things that you've discovered, because you'll be negatively labeled, you'll probably be isolated, you'll be shunned, you'll be rejected, and all of those different things. So it's really an isolating experience. It's a depressing experience. You start to make yourself, you start to feel like you're the one who's going crazy. And so that's how I started to feel when I started to discover these things.
I think about so many different sort of religious sects and how they sort of treat people who sort of question the norms or the status quo in similar ways, right? And I'm thinking, I mean, I can't imagine what that experience must be like because I never sort of formally became part of any religion. So how were you able to work through that so that you can sort of not lose your mind? Like, what were some of the ways that you was able to practice self-care to sort of transcend from that experience?
Yes, absolutely. Well, one of the things, that I did, I did some deep research. I did some deep research, verifying sources, confirming information, cross-referencing things that I needed to cross-reference to, have the confidence to know that, hey, I know that what I'm discovering is real, it's factual, it's the truth, and I'm indeed not going crazy. But I understood what I was dealing with. I understood what I was dealing with. I understood what I was dealing with in terms of the mentality of the people, who are part of this religion. And once upon a time, I had that mentality, but then I started to wake up and started to ask questions. Because the level of control that they have over their members is not really, the level of control that any group of people should have over, their religious adherents or members. So, just doing the research, confirming, cross-referencing the information to, assure myself that I'm indeed not going crazy, and, looking into, I also, looked into information on religious cults and understanding how religious cults operate and how they, keep their members under control. I did a lot of research on that. There's this cult expert whose books I've read. His name is Stephen Hassan. He himself is a former cult member and also a cult expert. He's a clinical psychologist who studied cults for many, many years. And, he has a lot of, great information about how cults operate, how they keep their members under control. And, he talks about the psychological conditioning that they put their members under to keep them reacting in the way that they react. So,
right.
And this kind of ties into the, conversation that you were having with the young lady, prior to me getting on, in terms of, how we're taught to police ourselves. And that's basically what they're taught. They're taught to correct their own thoughts, to correct their own behavior. Well, I shouldn't be thinking that. I shouldn't be asking those questions. I shouldn't be doing that. So they kind of stop themselves and police themselves, which, ends up leading to them, as you said, oppressing themselves. This is what they do. So they deny reality, and end up just, checking themselves to keep themselves in order.
Because I was thinking about the conversation I was having earlier, right? And I'm thinking about like the level of indoctrination, right? That because even when I'm thinking about the indoctrination that you went through, right? And then how you sort of liberated yourself from that indoctrination by accessing information, right? I think and that was what Carolina and I was just talking about before you got on, was thinking about like how like understanding the language of our experience, right? Like, and I think that's what information is about, like giving us access to language to describe what we're dealing with, so that we can sort of break the spell of the indoctrination, right? And it sounded like the research supported you with breaking the spell of your own indoctrination, because obviously, because I think as human beings, for some of us anyway, like if we have some kind of connection to the self, right? Our intuition tells us when something is off and it doesn't make sense. And I think that's what's happening overall in America, overall, even outside of religion, right? Thinking about, and I think people are waking up to, yo, this shit is fucked up and it don't make no sense. And something about my spidey senses is telling me to find out some more information about what is it that I'm dealing with here, or what we're dealing with collectively. And it sounds like, and so that doesn't only happen on an individual level, but even on a collective level. And so when I'm thinking about what you're sharing, how important accessing information was for you as far as your research to sort of break you out of the indoctrination. And I think people, and I think when we think about something, when we're thinking about like solutions, right? I think sometimes we don't understand how information is a solution or can lead you to a solution, right? Because I think we are conditioned and we're not encouraged to ask questions. Don't ask any questions. How dare you?
Absolutely. 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 And as you mentioned, it was that intuition, that feeling that something was off, that led me to, wanting to do that research. And you also used another really powerful word, indoctrination. And I think, reflecting on my own experience, I really believe that white supremacy, is indoctrination. It is indoctrination. We're indoctrinated in so many different ways. In ways that we, can understand, in some ways that we don't really understand. I mean, we're just surrounded with the subliminal messages, of, white people being in positions of power, white people in whiteness being significant, powerful, influential, and all of these different things. I mean, from the money that we use, the white males all on the, the currency that we use, depictions of Jesus Christ as a white man in the churches that we attend. Depictions of angelic beings being white. The indoctrination is everywhere.
Everywhere.
The subliminal messaging is everywhere. And, we pick up on that. And I think when it comes to the area of religion especially, that's the area that I think is most difficult for us to, really question and to pry on. Because we're taught that we're not supposed to question God. We're taught that we're not supposed to question this. But at the end of the day, people have to understand that everything that God supposedly said is what man told us God said. We have to understand that. And so, just doing that research and, just constantly doing the work of questioning, and thinking and, and pushing back on the stuff that we're being told.
And thinking about like you sort of accessing the information through the research, like how has that supported you through your evolutionary process?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
So I know you mentioned the research, and we know that that's one of the ways that you sort of liberated yourself, right, from the indoctrination. How has that supported you through your evolutionary process, through your growth and development as a human being?
That has been wonderful because it's been a great learning experience, because one of the great lessons that I took out of this experience is never just accept what somebody's telling me. Always question it. Always check for yourself. Never trust anybody's information but your own. You always got to verify information. You always got to confirm information, verify your sources, check your sources, and just question things that don't make any sense, and highlight that. That's so important, and I've just been living by that ever since.
It's funny because the way you answer that, because my final prompt is usually, what would you say to the audience as far as like what practice should they take on in order to sort of transcend white supremacy? And what you said, what I heard at least, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you said is question everything.
Yes.
Question everything.
Yes.
And anything they tell us, question the shit.
Yeah. You have to. You absolutely have to, because it is just so deep. The level of indoctrination, it is just so deep. You do the father of philosophy, the father of history, the father of mathematics, science. You look it up, it's always a white male popping up, but that has to tell us something. That has to tell us something. Is this the truth? Is this really history, or is this his story? Is this really, are these stories that they're just making up, and this stuff that they're just telling us?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important to question, because we don't question, right? We just take it as a faith, like, oh, that's what they said. That's what I learned in school. That's what that's what it is. I literally was having a conversation with somebody the other day around me questioning everything, right? It was like a sort of a negative reaction to my questions of everything. And I'm like, I question everything because that's how I make sense of the world, right? I'm like, I'm not gonna go through the world like completely oblivious just because that's where I feel most comfortable. I'm going to question things that don't make sense, or question things that I feel are harmful, or question things that I don't have all the answers to, obviously, right? And I think, and I remember in that conversation I was talking about questions that lead to clarity, which I was talking to Carolina about too before you got on. And I think the clarity, the questioning everything is the clarity is the most important part, right? Sort of being clear about what we deal with as human beings, because the clarity is how we can find our way out of the maze, out of the okie doke, out of the smoke and mirrors, out of the delusions, right? Clarity is what allows us to step out of the cave, right?
Yeah.
Into freedom. And I think that's such an important part, is to question everything.
Absolutely. And I think, we have to question. But like I said, I think religion is one of those areas where we really hesitate to question, because of the level of indoctrination that we've gone through in, whatever religious persuasion we happen to be in. We're taught that it's sinful, or that it's wrong, or it's against God to question. But who's really telling us that? Is it God telling us that, or is it a man telling us that? And we have to question, when it comes to these religious teachings, who do these religious teachings benefit? Who's privileged in these religious institutions? Who does it benefit? Who becomes more powerful off of it? Who becomes
Like,
wealthy off of
what's the
it?
bottom line? Like, what's the
Yeah.
bottom line?
What's the bottom line,
What's
right?
the bottom line?
What is
And
the
the bottom
reality?
line is the bottom line. Is really what it is.
Exactly. We're told that we have to wait on our heaven while people have their heaven here right on earth.
That don't make no
At,
sense to
at
me.
this minute. So we have to question. We have to question.
We have to question, and I'm thinking to myself, the current state of the world right now, the way that it is in turmoil, that the way that it's on fire, I'm thinking about, because I've been thinking to my own self, obviously through my own sort of evolutionary process, thinking about like, how do I sort of align more with my indigenous self, right? And sort of come back to the earth and thinking about sort of the indigenous folks before us, whether they were from Africa or the indigenous folks from this part of the world. The indigenous folk of our planet were always connected to the earth and sort of
Hmm.
not sort of worshiping these sort of gods that and sort of encapsulated in these religious sort of dogmas, and how that was a different experience, right, for the indigenous folk of the world, and thinking about how many of us lost touch with that, and but how important that I think it is for us to come back to that, right, so that we can sort of further evolve as human beings and not sort of not be subjected to the needless suffering that most of us deal with because of religion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking about these, indigenous practices and traditions, there's been, there's been this throughout the centuries, throughout the years, there's been this demonization of indigenous religious practices and traditions, of African practices and traditions, things that are not Eurocentric, things that are not white centric. There's been this demonization of because of their own misunderstandings of it. You know, um,
Mm-hmm.
our people had such a connect. Our people had such a strong connection to nature, and to them that was spiritual. We took
Mm-hmm.
care of the world because we understood that that was spiritual and that was important.
That's
You
right.
know, and there's just been a moving away from that of our people because of how we've been conditioned to look at those traditional and indigenous practices.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear you. Listen. I'm all the way with you. And I think that's how we really sort of, I think, sort of getting back to those sort of practices, our indigenous practices will be, I think, is crucial to our sort of overall, not only individual but collective healing, right? And for me, because how I see it is like reconnecting back to the source energy, right? So that could look like whatever it looks like for any individual, but like to reconnect back to the source energy is like it's like coming home. I mean, that's what I'm describing it in my brain, right? Like it's like a coming home because we've been
Hmm.
so displaced for so long that we forgot what home feels like. And I think when I think about indigenous practices or spiritual practices, I think about like the coming homeness of it all. I remember when I first got like introduced to the African Orishas from the Yoruba spiritual practices, which actually came from my grandmother, my abuela Sita. Um, but it was like demonized when I was a kid, like because mostly my father's side of the family, like, oh, that's devil worshiping or black magic or whatever it was. But then when I
Right.
got older and I got like reintroduced to it in my own way, uh, it felt like the lighting of a candle to a deity or an orisha that represents something beyond anything that was Christian felt like there was a coming homeness. There was something about it that made me feel um, more like I was vibrating at my own like I was more like I was vibrating in harmony with the universe the way I was supposed to vibrate without
Hmm.
without all of the judgments or all of the things that come from like Christianity, say for example, right? And I
Hmm.
thought, and for me that was a powerful. Now I'm not a religious person or anything. However, there's certain practices that I take on that allow me to come back home, to get grounded back and centered to the self, right? Which
Yeah.
is the source energy. And I think that's important for us to sort of consider when we're thinking about like spiritual practices or spirituality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we have to develop our own, perspectives and viewpoints on that and not allow, teachings from some other, cultural group to dictate how we're supposed to view, other people's and cultural groups' practices. But again, at the end of it all, at the center of it all, is white supremacy. That
Yeah,
anything that is not born of or coming from white people has to be bad.
that part.
Everything that comes from us has to be good, and everything that comes from everybody else has to be bad.
That part.
Mm-hmm.
My brother, it was good talking to you. I know, like, we started late, but we still had the conversation.
Yes,
I
and I'm glad
appreciate
that we
you.
did.
Huh?
And I'm glad that we did.
I'm glad we did too. I appreciate you still sticking here, even though it was like a technical situation. You thought it was nothing about, but I'm glad that you was able to like still sort of go through your experience because I think it was an interesting conversation, and important for other people to hear your experience because I'm sure. We know that other people are dealing with similar situations that you've experienced as well. And
Absolutely.
we need to free our mind, man. We got to free our mind.
Yes,
But
sir.
with that being said, thank you for showing up to this IG live series. Also, I really appreciate you always supporting my work because I know, like, especially on LinkedIn, you're like sharing. Most people they don't even look at the stuff for whatever. Maybe it's not like whatever enough, right? Or maybe obviously it doesn't align with the status quo. People sometimes don't want to like press like or share of something that might make them in trouble. And so I thank you for always supporting the work, and I look forward to having another conversation with you again. In the meantime, I'm just gonna sort of wind down this conversation because I don't know how long I've been on this thing. But I just wanted to say to anybody in the audience, if you want to see a replay of this, it's going to be reposted, and then go to at the Liberated Self at YouTube, and the whole thing should be uploaded after I get it to upload on my phone. In the meantime, any final things you want to say, Shaquem?
Of course, it's the least I can do in terms of, supporting you and your work. You do great work. And I really appreciate it. And I really appreciated being in this space and being invited here. So thank you so much.
Thank you, my brother. I'll talk to you real soon, okay?
All right. Take care now.
All right, take care. Power and love to the people.
Yes.